Could Starfield end up being a timed exclusive? I know this seems crazy. I've gotten a lot of pushback on this theory, but I think there are a lot of recent developments that point to the possibility of this being the plan all along. Not necessarily related to the Activision deal, but I do think that may push this becoming a concession from Xbox. But I want to look at a lot of different things. I know people are probably thinking, this is clickbait. There's just no way, man. Let me walk through all of the different things that I've discovered. I've done a lot of research and looked into a lot of different things about certain phrases they're using with Starfield that aren't really showing up for any other games except for certain games, and you'll be interested to know what those games are and what exactly happened with them. I also want to look at the CFO's comments that we looked the other day and what that's going to look like in light of all of the new things the FTC is asking for with the pushback from Sony. This could become a concession now that the FTC is really pressing in on wanting to know strategy for future ZeniMax properties as well as Call of Duty. Starfield could end up in the mix here, and I think there's a lot of information that's readily available. So listen, I want to walk through a bunch of different things. Number one, the original talks about the potential of a Starfield PS5 exclusive. I'm going to show you guys screenshots and stuff. This is way more legit than I initially thought. I kind of brushed that off and thought, oh, that was a rumor. There was a pretty respected person that was tied in. We're going to look at what they were saying. There were apparently talks. I want to look at the Pete Hines interview where he sort of waffles and doesn't really know what the future is with respect to ZeniMax and Bethesda properties being never sort of on the PlayStation ever again. I want to look at the phrase arrives exclusively. I've done a ton of research into this, and I really think we might have something here, so let me show you, okay? I also want to look at Sony's recent concerns, and then I will look at the Xbox CFO's remarks. So, first order of business, this is a Game Informer article from back in September the 22nd of 2022. Starfield was reportedly in talks to be aimed as a PS5 exclusive before the Microsoft acquisition. Now, many people have dismissed this. They've just said there's no way that was ever going to happen. I think there were even remarks recently from Todd Howard about like they build for Xbox first. That doesn't mean that these talks weren't already potential in the works, if you consider what was going on at the time. So, right here, the latest report about one of the alternate timelines for Starfield comes from esteemed journalist and industry insider Imran Khan. According to a recent Twitter post from Khan, quote, "The timing on this announcement is absolutely fascinating. The week after Sony solidifies their existing exclusivity with some Bethesda games, but the day before, Xbox opens up pre-orders." So they've got these deals with Deathloop and Ghostwire, which Ghostwire is going to play a part in this video. Bear with me. I'll get to it in a moment. So he goes on to say this, though. The timing was genius. There is no denying that. But apparently the $7.5 billion deal has an even greater impact than we originally thought. Khan followed up his initial tweet saying that Sony was reportedly looking into a special deal with Bethesda's sci-fi new IP. Quote, "Sony had been negotiating timed exclusivity on Starfield as recently as a few months ago," he said. "Going to guess either those talks are done or the price suddenly went way up." I want you to think about when this lands in the timeline. This is in September of 2020, okay? This is 3 years ago. 2 years after this, the game's supposed to be launching, right? So you're in you got 2 years left in your development pipeline. That means there's a version for the PlayStation 5. There's absolutely no way they were going to negotiate a timed exclusivity deal for a port or something that wasn't being built for the PS5. So that means there is a build somewhere that was being worked on. We don't know if it was completely stopped or halted. We don't even know if they tucked this away as a backup plan for something to do later on down the line, given they want to recoup those costs on the deal. So one more thing we've got to look at now that we've looked at the PS5 exclusive talks is, I want to look at this Pete Hines interview, okay? This is NME.com reporting on this during Gamescom right here, 2021 live stream, all right? Pete Hines was in my opinion, kind of waffling. There wasn't a lot of solidity here, okay? He says this, I have no idea how to state it. I don't know. I don't know the answer. It doesn't exist. It's not like I know it and just don't want to tell you, but the quote down here is the most important part. Starfield, it was announced as a thing that's an Xbox exclusive, he said. I don't know if I would go so far as to say you're done ever playing stuff on PlayStation, but again, I don't know the answer to that right now. So everything goes through. September's when the announcement comes, and then a year later, August of 2021, this guy is head of publishing at Bethesda, and he's saying, I don't know. He's saying, I don't have the answer to that right now. What I would say this indicates is nothing specific about Starfield, but it seems that there is a potential discussion going on, and there's uncertainty about the strategy going forward, which I think ties into some of the things we're going to talk about when I get to the CFO quotes. I think they started looking at the way they wanted to treat property that they bought, and were thinking through, what could we do to maximize the profitability here? I don't think limiting titles forever to your ecosystem is something that Microsoft is interested in long term. I think some of the things we're seeing with how hard they're pressing for the Activision deal to go through by just handing out 10-year contracts to literally anybody who can hold a pen, they're seemingly more interested in software distribution as well as mobile, my gosh. But that's the bigger picture here is I don't think they're so interested anymore. Like, no, it's on our system and it's never going anywhere. Let's look at some of the other things that I think are very, very telling. In the wake of the Starfield announcement, this is the official Bethesda.net website. It was pointed out to me that there's interesting phrasing because I was trying to say, hey, is it coming to Game Pass? What's going on? Game Pass is no longer in the marketing of like the trailer. It's right here, play it day one on Game Pass. So that's not in dispute. That's not really worth discussing. We know it's a day and date title. Right here is what I want to focus on, and I've researched this, so track with me here. Starfield arrives exclusively on Xbox Series X, S, and PC on September the 6th, 2023. Arrives exclusively is such a strange way of putting it. It honestly sounds strange if you think about it. You don't hear this phrase often. Now, I had people tell me, no, they say that all the time. They say that all the time. I went to Google, and I had a really hard time finding any press announcements, any trailers that say this, except for two. And especially the most recent one, I think is a little telling because it's attached to Bethesda. I'm pretty excited if you can't tell, okay? So I was even using the quotation, so Google was only looking for arrives exclusively on Xbox or arrives exclusively on PlayStation. I thought, does either company use this phrasing? And lo and behold, one of the games that was a part of all of this right before the buyout is Ghostwire Tokyo. Interesting that this tweet on February the 3rd of 2022, so track with the timeline, the announcement, everything is being bought in 2020, 2021. Pete Hines is like, I don't know, I can't really say, right? This seems like strategies might be shifting. And then when Ghostwire Tokyo announces its launch on PlayStation 5, here is this very interesting phrase. It's set to come to Xbox in April of 2023, right around the corner. So again, we have a game with timed exclusivity saying Ghostwire Tokyo arrives exclusively on PlayStation 5 now, and it launches same day on PC. So when you see arrives exclusively on PlayStation 5, but then it says launches same day on PC, it's almost like, yeah, it arrives exclusively on PS5, indicating that's the console and that's a timed exclusivity. And this is Ghostwire. This is attached to, likely, the marketing lingo and language from Bethesda and Pete Hines, head of publishing. Who knows? This seems to be a trajectory, right? They buy the company. In 2021, he's like, yeah, I don't know. This is all kind of in flux. I can't give you a solid answer. And then they say, arrives exclusively. This is also really interesting. So not only do we have another timed exclusive game, there was one more. It was Earth Defense Force Iron Rain, but I couldn't find a good website. I also found that one saying arrives exclusively on PlayStation, and then 6 months later, it showed up on Steam. Interesting. It's almost like that phrase is very rarely used, and it's seemingly now 2 games in a row are timed exclusives. Let's look where else this strange phrase shows up. This is an official Xbox blog. Redfall revealed coming exclusively to Xbox Series X and S. Okay, that's pretty good. Coming, it's not necessarily saying timed exclusivity, but then when we scroll down here again, arrives exclusively. This is back when it had a November 11th release date. So it's almost like from the very beginning, anytime they talked about Starfield's release date, they were making sure to say arrives exclusively. Now, I don't think this is a smoking gun, but it's extremely interesting in light of the fact that back when all this happened, you had an insider saying Sony was negotiating a Starfield exclusivity. You got Pete Hines saying, I don't know the answer right now. And then a little while later, you got Ghostwire Tokyo marketing itself, in 2022, saying, yeah, arrives exclusively on PlayStation 5, indicating that's a timed exclusive. That's like timed exclusive language. I'm not done. If we look at the CFO's remarks, we covered this recently. There was an event that the CFO of Xbox was doing an interview about the Bethesda acquisition, and he had the following to say, and I really want to highlight this part right here. First, better, or best. So he basically says, in the long run, we want it to be either first, better, or best on our platforms. We want Bethesda content to show up as best as on our platforms. He reiterates it again down here. He says, but I suspect you'll continue to see us shift towards a first or better or best approach on our platforms. So first, better, or best being repeated twice like that, to me, that's an internal talking point. And this is when I think it gets interesting. If their internal theories and thoughts about Bethesda at that time was first, better, or best, that would make sense why Pete Hines is like, I don't really know the answer to that right now, because apparently they were thinking through a paradigm of it could land first, better, or best. First would be timed exclusivity. It would be something that lands there first. We're seeing the reverse of that with Ghostwire, right? First on PlayStation, and then it comes to Xbox, and they use the arrives exclusively language. Starfield was already in talks with potentially doing an exclusive with PlayStation 5, which means there's a build for PlayStation 5, which means Microsoft higher-ups might say, listen, we could make money off that. That's property worth selling at some point. Make sure anytime you talk about Starfield's arrival that you use this phrase, because that gives us that vagueness, that sort of, hey, we said it arrived exclusively, and it certainly arrived exclusively. That doesn't mean it can't go anywhere else. Xbox exclusives can, I think, commonly land in other places if they take this strategy. They could start to say it boosts our ecosystem, makes us really appealing for the first 6 months or a year, whatever, and then it'll hit other platforms. I think in light of Sony's recent concerns, the FTC wanting to see more into their plans for ZeniMax, this could be something that Microsoft tucked away as a potential revenue strategy of like making the money back on the property that they bought, but it could really work in their favor as a concession. Listen, you guys keep saying that we went back on our word with ZeniMax, because they did, like they said, case-by-case basis, and then they came out and like every game is being listed as an exclusive. That's not case-by-case basis. That's blanket. You're like, yeah, now that it's ours, we don't need to do case-by-case basis. These are all Xbox exclusives. This would win them points, I think, with the regulators. It would win them points with the public. Now, the Xbox fans might not be too happy, but the Xbox fans are very quick to turn any of these things into a dunk. So they can say, hey, look, Microsoft's even willing to give you guys Starfield further down the line. Quit your crying, Sony, because apparently that's what they think multi-billion-dollar corporations do. They cry a lot. So this is something that I do think could happen. Starfield as a timed exclusive. I'm not crazy. I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat. There are breadcrumbs here, and I think they lead to a tasty meal. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Hit subscribe, hit the bell button so I could see you in the next video.